hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me share the screen. It always takes a few seconds to prepare everything here. Just a second. So we were talking about alternatives, right?
Mm.
Before we started. And this is the lesson we have for today, the alternatives. It is not a very easy lesson that we are going to be studying today, uh, because Joanna de Angelis is going to be talking about pain, the pain in the world. Remember that last week we were talking about the blessings of life, where in a way she introduced to us the idea that um, many occurrences that happen to us, even when they represent challenges, they are difficult, they bring suffering and pain, not necessarily from the perspective of the immortal spirit, we would call them or should label them as being a bad thing, a bad occurrence in our lives. From the material perspective, yes, we just want to, to live our life in peace, the less suffering, the better. But from the spiritual perspective, analyzing on, a broader way, we will see that many times they are actually what we call the blessings in disguise.
Mm.
And so, following the line of thinking that she was presenting last week about the blessings, she will continue talking about the subject that is pain, and trying to explain to us things that I'm sure are very constant on our minds. Uh, Trying to understand, why do we suffer? Is it really necessary? Can we avoid that? And what good can come out of it? And so, continuing this lesson, this study of the book alert, lesson 46, this is the topic we are going to be referring to today. So she says, life expresses itself through many alternatives. No matter your behavior, you will face the alternative of suffering. As much as you try to evade it, you will not journey immune to pain. The biological phenomenon of deterioration of the organic instruments is inherent in the physiological equipment obeying the program for which it was created. So let's stop here and start analyzing what she's bringing here. In this first statement, she's basically addressing us who already have a different perspective of life with words of encouragement. The idea here is not to put us down, it's just to say, if you are questioning yourself about what you're doing in terms of wondering if the sufferings, the challenges that have been coming your way is the result of your current behaviors, and that's why you're suffering. Do not believe that this is necessarily so. Even if you are on the right track, doing all the best that you can, now you will still cannot prevent suffering in our lives for several reasons. We are going to be talking more about it as we continue. So it is very important for us to have this in mind, because one thing that can make us fail is actually the idea that what we are doing um, has no point. I'm doing all the best that I can, and it's still life happens. So what's the point of continue doing that? And she's saying here, no, don't connect these two things. And actually, we know that uh, if we come to a point where we are going to give up and return to our old habits, we can even contribute even more to pain. Again, we cannot forget that according to the spirit hierarchy, we are on the lower level of evolvement, on the ladder of evolvement. Spirits considered to be of the third category, which is the last one. We are still on a world that is called a world of trials and atonements. So it's the characteristic of our world that we are going to face trials and atonements. Yes, we are changing. There is a planetary transition going on for over 50 years or more, but we are still in the process of, like we always remember, a new day starts in the dark. When it's 12:01 in the morning, it's still very, very dark. When it's 1 a.m., it is still very, very dark. So we are in this period. We are changing, but we still are in this period. So she mentions here, she start bringing this idea like, if we think that we can avoid any cause of suffering, let's look at our physical body. Our physical body deteriorates. So even if nothing else is happening, I have no problems with family, friends, money, profession, the physical body is going to go through a process of decay. It's subject to illnesses. Uh, and to elderly age, all the the pains that come from this. So that alone already constitutes something that is going to bring us pain, right? So this is more or less the introduction that she brings here. Any comments or questions? I see that Orlando has one. Let's see if somebody else wants to say something first. Or
Like suffering is one of the best ways for us to learn, unfortunately. Like higher level planets, folks can suffer through abundance and joy, or learn rather through abundance and joy. But it seems like for us, we've got to suffer in order to learn the lessons that we need to, unfortunately.
yeah. Yeah, it is unfortunate, Jeff, because and also even addressing already the question from Orlando, what makes us suffer is our physical bodies. Um, yeah, our physical body makes us suffer, but mostly it is because of our spiritual behavior. Okay, like we just said, we cannot prevent the deterioration nature. It is nature. Okay, our eyes are not going to be the same, our hearing are not going to be the same, hair, etc. Everything is decaying and falling, right? Yeah, so this is nature. This is nature. There is fall, there is winter. um, but overall, it's still other things that we could prevent that is the result of the behavior of our spirit, how we react, how we act in relation to certain things. And the thing here, Jeff, like you said, unfortunately we are still choosing the path of pain. We've been aggravating our path because there are many things that we could make it better, and we are not. Acceptance, for instance, we would already make this better, saying, okay, like she's saying here, it's an affirmation. You cannot remove suffering from your lives, not at this point. Okay, so, but we can remove unnecessary suffering that we are causing ourselves to us. Zoraida, you want to say something? Or?
Yes, yes, I was going to say, just like Jeff has explained so clearly, but I go back and I think of other ways of why we suffer. Let's say an example like uh, what you just said about the Florida, the building collapsing. There was negligence, right? It could have, it didn't have to happen, but it did, was negligence. So a lot of this has to do with a lot of negligence in our part, even though we are here to pay for what we have done before. We understand that. Then you look at people that don't understand. I have a lot of people in our family that uh, die of cancer. Okay, we all have to die of something. We know that, but
Mhm.
there's signs there, the smoking, the food that you eat, all these things, and yet they continue to do 'em. So sometimes instead of loving ourselves, we bring the pain. And then you get the extra suffering, you get more. You don't have to if you take care of certain things in life.
Mhm.
So instead of pain, let's choose love ourselves, and take care of ourselves and everything around this planet Earth. So it's very difficult, if you don't understand these things.
Yes. Okay, let's read a little more. Aside from the physical equipment, the psychological and emotional manifestations also create disarrays and afflictions. They incorporate the landscape of human agony. In addition to this, there are moral pains, excruciating and sharp, from which no one is immune. I mean, with all these beautiful words that she utilizes here, what she's trying to tell us is, besides the physical decay, there is the psychological, emotional disturbances that we bring related to, even previous incarnations, the phobias that we have that do not allow us to act goodly in a good way. Apart from that, we have the problems with family members, the moral pains that she calls here, even when we are unjustly accused of something that you know thank God is not correct, but all those things, they cause us suffering, they bring us suffering, and we have to consider that. And except from the reason why they are happening, in the moment there are happening, there is not much we can do in terms of not going through that, except accepting, not paying that much attention, and understanding that they are related to experiences, atonements we have to go through, and move on. But still, they are going to affect us. One thing that is there is unfortunately, I don't remember. I already asked some friends which book the Spirit Emmanuel talks about that, and of course he doesn't use the words that I'm using, but it's the meaning is the same, that when we especially that are dedicating ourselves to spiritual values, more conscious, or in terms of self-awareness and inner transformation, we and been doing that for a while, we get very surprised when when bad things happen to us, and even others. Wow, my God, you look a saint to me. How come you're going through that? And the Spirit Emmanuel says, you have to remember that considering eternity, you have been good for 5 minutes. you have hours and hours of, wrongdoings in your past. So for 5 minutes that you have behaved, you want compensation for, the hours and hours of, of piling up very serious and damaging things to your spirit. But keep on going, because then, of course, you're going to be changing the landscape of even your present and definitely your future. And addressing the comment from Orlando, once more, everything that is bad, negative, was not created by God. Is the result of us very much like misbehaved children saying, I know better. I barely change from shorts to pants, right? But I know better. You're old. Your thoughts are from the past. It's not like this anymore. You don't know, okay? And while we still refuse to go with, the voice of experience, in that famous phrase, the wisdom come from learning from other mistakes, we will be making the mistakes and facing their consequences. So again, like I always say, it could be so much easier and comforting perhaps for us to blame God. Say no, uh, God was wrong in his plans. Right? It's I know better. He should have done this or that. um, it's part of the experience of life. And life, when I say life, I'm saying life in the physical plane and the spiritual plane, in both planes. Let's read one more. Pain, however, is a normal process framed in life. It is everywhere, expressing itself in various manifestations in the dimensions of the evolutionary processes. The more delicate the perceptions of the being, the larger the manifestations are. Evolved or delayed, humanity always suffers in its injunctions because they express in the reality of the being itself. It results from personal actions taking in one existence, which becomes the genesis, the origin of inevitable afflictive manifestations in another. So again, she's emphasizing the aspect that is still in our level of involvement in this planet, there's no way we are not be facing pain. It can even become more of an issue the more we evolve, because, like, for instance, now we were talking about, the building that collapsed, right? Before, we couldn't care less. I mean, we were not worried about our fellow beings. It was just me, 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 me all the time. Now, although there is a lot of me, me in our times, we already look outside. We are already touched by the pains and the experiences of other people. That's when she says here, the more delicate, the more sensitive we become, the more we will feel the impact of the suffering of our fellow beings, because we don't want them to go through that as much as we don't want ourselves to go through that. And so when we think about Jesus living among us, Jesus was definitely suffering, looking his young brothers and sisters, compromising themselves. Okay, he absolutely, being a pure spirit, would not get into despair, would not get into a rebellion, would not be questioning God's wisdom, but still he suffered for us, with us, knowing about the pains, understanding what we had to do. There is this beautiful, beautiful passages in the book 2000 Years, the book written by the Spirit Emmanuel through the psychography of Chico Xavier. That is when the senator Publius Lentulus, exactly Emmanuel in that existence, his daughter was very ill, and he met Jesus with the insistence of his daughter and his wife, not out of his own volition, to see if Jesus could heal her. At the time, she was suffering from leper. And well, Jesus healed her from distance. Uh, but he has a conversation with this spirit, the senator, that he says, it's up to you to follow me now, or still to go through centuries of suffering until you decide. Which was exactly what happened. He didn't follow Jesus, and it took him centuries to have a similar opportunity, and finally to detach and to understand that he had to amend his ways. So this is because this is why we say Jesus was suffering. He knew that was his choice. He couldn't do anything about it. And we, as we evolve, we will be suffering as well with the suffering of our brothers and sisters. And and here in the last paragraph, she's saying whether we are more evolved or not, we still have to deal with our past. We still have to deal with our actions. Of course, there is this other magnificent phrase from Jesus that says, love covers a multitude of sins. So instead of going through the path of pain that teaches us so much, we can go through the path of love that requires sacrifice. So it is a different type of pain, but it is still a process that we have to go through. Questions, comments? Okay, let's read one more. Faith by no means will free you from suffering. We are still in that phase in our lives, spiritual lives, that we think that we can trade goods with God. We can make a bargain, right? Okay, I'll do that. I will say the rosary, I don't know how many times, and you give me that in return, or you will spare me this suffering in return. So no, unfortunately, it's not the way it works. So she says, it will offer you resources to ease the pain, giving you understanding to face it. It will arm you with courage to prevent despair, which can further mortify you. The belief in the Christian message by way of service towards another transforms itself into an irrelevant ideal, albeit its magnitude. It will not free the being from suffering or improving itself. So she says here, no trade, no bargaining, but you will gain so much from it. Strength, courage, resignation, understanding. It will give this, courage for you not to get into despair. It will help you by understanding, your goal, the what the law of the universe is, and the paths we have to take. That it's going to be very useful to you, and also if you can apply that to your fellow beings, helping them, it will make all this process of improvement even better and happening faster. So suffering will be there. And again, another thing that we cannot prevent is the work on the self. And this is everything that we've been studying in this book is about the working on the self, so that we can read that we can read this, process of self improvement. Comments, questions? No one loses their time with faith. Faith, faith soothes our pains. Uh, it brings us. I mean, I know it's very hard. It's very hard to talk to about this to people that has no belief whatsoever, because they can misunderstand our words, and talking about loss and pain of losing someone again. We are not saying here that we are not ourselves going to not feel the pain of losing a loved ones. We are always going to feel that, unless we have a psychological pathology, right? So we are psychopaths. Otherwise, there is no way we are not going to feel that. But there is different ways of feeling it, of manifesting it. When we have faith, when we have understanding, when we have the understanding that we live in a world. Sorry, my phone is ringing and I don't know how to turn it off without first turning on. It's interfering. Um, so we will feel the same way, but we will not get into despair. We will be somehow comforted by knowing that that we are immortal, that the person that has come to us has not perished. So we will have this comforting. So for those who have faith, even though it is still hard, it's going to be a bit easier than not having it all. And here we are not talking about blind faith. We are not talking about oh no, I don't know, God, the designs, etc. No, we are talking about a very rational faith. We have in this life, we have a beginning, we have an end, and but this end doesn't represent the end, and there will be a new beginning again. And all this is so much more comforting. But I understand that is very, very hard. So for those who have lost their loved ones, we can only say that we will offer them our prayers, that we sympathize and that we understand their pains, because I believe at this point most of us here have already gone through some loss in life, so we really can sympathize with that. and and if they are willing to, we can even say, you know, we know that this love and this connection is never going to be lost. So ideals sustain intelligent life and favor it with values that embellish and dignify it. So she's talking here about, the ideal of eternal life, of, of everything that we are going through, having a purpose. It's very hard. I mean, both alternatives can be very difficult. The alternative that I am suffering uh, an unfair uh, punishment or suffering is horrible. Okay, to say why it's happening to me. I don't think I'm a person that deserves that. And I cannot believe that God, I mean, me that I'm a very moral person, God has been giving me so much struggles, and you see other people around that are horrible people, according to our point of view. They are, we are not, of course, and their lives are beautiful. So this is horrible, but it's difficult as well when we have to come and say, listen, everything that comes to you on your way is the result of your own actions. Many people still will prefer to be blaming God for being so unfair, because the alternative means I have to accept that I am the one that has provoked all of this in my life. But once we do that because of faith, because of understanding, like we always mention here, what would be the logical next step? If I am the one responsible for all the suffering that is happening to me, what can I do to change this pattern? If I have the control, what can I do to change that? And this is where, you know, spiritism, spiritual values come into place. They give you a formula, they give you guidelines. So, however, they do not immunize the individual from affliction. What we have been said, the edified ideals, let me see here, is like a long childbirth. And like any childbirth, it hurts. But for all the mothers and fathers in the world, although at the moment they may say, never again, they will be ready for once more, right? And we'll be very happy with the result. So it's what happens with our experiences, what it's going through, going up with us, right? Any comments or questions so far? No. Okay, so let's go to the next one. The alternative in the ideal in suffering is the most accurate. There are those who suffer making others suffer. There are others who suffer due to others' suffering. There are those who suffer because they do not have the means to inflict suffering. There are those who suffer due to frustrations, bitterness, and illnesses that they could lessen if they would be willing to love and serve. The alternative of suffering while doing good is always the best. However, there are those who elect other alternatives. You see, this is really the explaining of love covers a multitude of sins. We will have to go through all this process. It's part of the world, but what is going to be the path I'm going to choose? The one that I am aware, improving, serving, growing, and all this process represent self-denial, sacrifices, you know, leaving behind all things that have been so detrimental to us, which is not easy, right? Or we will just continue insisting in doing other things that are going to bring horrible consequences to us, but it will not lead us to a path of evolvement. We will still be delaying ourselves in the same place we have been dwelling for quite some time. So here, when she says there are those who suffer due to other suffering, is when we sympathize, when we are there, when we share their sufferings with them. But suffering because we make others suffer, because we are bitter, because we would like to inflict suffering, but we cannot. So this is really complicated, right? Comments, questions? It is a difficult lesson, right? Not what we would like to hear at all. Okay, so she finishes by saying, do not become discouraged by pain, because of pain that macerates and purifies everyone. Now, live in your eye. Do not be discouraged because the pain now lives in your island of earlier happiness. Receive it naturally and with pride, not allowing yourself hopelessness or rebellion. Benefit from the opportunity to suffer, meditating around the real values of existence. Transform this suffering in an incandescent star, spilling clarity in the sky of your inner landscapes, which now finds itself in bewilderment but predisposed to peace. So, if there is no way we can avoid it, the best course of action would be, what can I do to go through that um, with less pain as possible? And she's giving us the recipe here. Do not become discouraged. Understand that it's bringing you purification. It is bringing you important lessons for the present and the future. And once you go through that, calmer days will come, will be the result of that. Or, the sun will shine, and will bring you more peace. The more we resist, the more difficult it will become. I'm just, I don't remember exactly the name of this plant, that there is a tale that talks about an oak tree and this little plant that swings in the wind. And when the hurricane comes, the hurricane is capable of removing and destroying the strong oak tree, removing its roots from the ground. But this little plant that knows how to sway with the wind remains intact. So this is what happens here when we are facing the winds of uh, you know, pain, suffering, challenges, all of that. Let's just be malleable, accepting that it is there to to in our own benefit. It is not there to destroy us. This is never the purpose of the divine providence. And like we said before, the less we resist, the more we are going to be able to overcome all that and marching towards the future where this is no longer going to be an issue. It's going to be a much better, happier, and peaceful future for all of us. and even present, because the way we go through things, accepting things, definitely is going to help us a lot. Questions,
Miss
comments?
Ada, I have a question.
Yes.
Um, what about science? Science is progressing in helping us with our suffering and uh, and correcting what nature uh, has not done properly. Is that going to be a problem of science
Sorry,
interfering
I don't
with
know if I
nature?
understood. You said, what about pain that causes
Yeah,
suffering?
yeah, pain and suffering. Science is correcting that.
Uh, um, yeah, but this is the result of merit, Orlando. That's why I love science. And I thank God all the time that science come with solutions to remove from human beings unnecessary pain. We can talk about that in relation to anesthetics. We can talk about that in relation to electricity. Thank God, we are here on the with a high temperature, and we have the ACs to help us, or when it's lower temperature, we have the heating. Uh, we have washing machines. We have so many things, so many possibilities. We have, painkillers. We have medicine to help us in this so many illness. All of that are the result of um, us improving behaviors and no longer need to go through unnecessary pain. Even that, there are people that, for instance, in childbirth, decide not to take any kind of painkiller and go through all that. But God has given us ways of not going through this. We are not here criticizing anyone's choices, okay? We're just saying we have choices, right, in what we eat. Before, I mean, we didn't have that many alternatives. Today, we have so many alternatives to live a healthier life in terms of nourishment, in terms of exercising, in terms of sunlight, all of that. So, science uh, can open up this way to us. Art, you know, it's so soothing when we are listening to good music that can calm down ourselves, for instance, when we are appreciating or reading a good book, or watching a play or a movie, or admiring a painting that brings us, uh, uh, do something, good with our emotions. So all of those things are God's blessing and marriage for the being that lives in the 21st century. Things that we didn't have on the 10th century, 12, 15, first. So all of that represents possibilities, like we've even said about the collapsing building. 3 years ago, they had uh, an advice that they had to do something. Whether we are going to benefit from that or not, okay, we may say, oh, there is so much science being used for the wrong purpose. Yes, it's human nature. We are the ones that are abusing from our power. But on the other hand, like for instance, when you talk about the internet, I hear so many people say, oh, there are so many bad things in the internet, but there are so many good things. I'm attuning with the good things. You are attuning with the bad one, is your choice, right? And people are only doing them because there is a demand for them. Once there is no demand for that, they will no longer do it, right? Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we can finish for today.